Adventures in Imperfect Living.
Hey, greetings, folks. Welcome to another edition of Adventures in Imperfect Living. I'm Greg Willits from RosaryArmy.com.
And I'm Jennifer Willits, his wife.
Got some voicemail to share with you. Also, going to give you an update on our experience at the new Barnes & Noble. We talked about it the last show or the 2 shows ago, and I was surprised at the amount of feedback that we got. And you might be asking, why should you care about, if this is your first time listening, it's like these people are going to talk about going to a bookstore. Well, it was an experience. And Barnes & Noble's been changing things, and we were surprised at how they changed things. So we'll talk about that. Also, going to share with you a way for you to never forget anything ever again for the rest of your life.
Oh, wow. I can't wait to hear this. Because I'm always forgetting what I ate the day before.
Is that overselling? To say at that level?
That's a bit high. That's a very high expectation now.
How about I give a almost 1 year review of some methods that I have been incorporating to help remember what's important, to be able to track things that I've read and heard, and to revisit those things on a regular basis so that the lessons that I've learned become a part of my core working knowledge, memory, and ways that I'm meditating on things.
Okay.
How about that? Is that a little bit better?
Well, does this apply to remembering people's names?
No, because I don't.
That's not important.
Because I don't write those down. I don't write down the names of people that come my way.
Fair enough.
But I will tell you one person's name that I will never forget, and that's our friend Steve in Texas. You might want to put on your headphones for this one. Steve sent us some voicemail. Steve. We've talked about him in the past. We've met him on a few occasions. Longtime listener, supporter of Rosary Army and various initiatives over the years. Just a super nice guy. And I did a clarion call for voicemail feedback, and here's how Steve responded.
Hey, Greg and Jennifer, this is Steve in Texas. I got 2 things for you. First thing, I'm not dead yet. Second thing is, wait a minute. What was the second thing? Oh, yeah. No, just remembered. I'm recording this as my voice because, you asked me to. Right. And I really did enjoy your visit with John Mark Grodi. I had a very good time watching you. I watched for a change, but I also listened to you without the video. It was really a joy. I hope you enjoy the voicemail. Don't complain that you never got one from me.
There you go. I will never complain.
This is indeed a voicemail.
Yes.
I'm sending you a voicemail. I did it.
It's a little bit like how I write letters these days or email. Like I am sending this email to acknowledge that I'm sending you this email.
Yes, but I am glad that you're not dead yet.
Yes.
That you are still blessing us with your life and your wit,
the man,
your humor.
I'm not kidding you. The man's been hit like at least twice while riding a bicycle by a car. So the fact that he's still with us, thank God, Steve's still with us. Steve, good to hear from you. Thank you for that. Yeah, we've gotten some nice comments. We've had a huge influx of people who have discovered Rosary Army as a result of our recent appearance on EWTN, it's always nice to have that sort of the statistic bump, right? Our website statistics go up. We've had new people sign up as or following the podcast on YouTube. Yeah. We've seen, and by the way, this is a new thing. I sometimes say, make sure you, or not sometimes, I've been saying it for 19 years since we started podcasting. Always say, make sure you subscribe to the show on iTunes or wherever you get or on Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your favorite shows. They now have changed Apple Podcasts. You don't subscribe to things anymore. Did you notice this?
No, because I haven't subscribed to anything in a long time. So what is it? They've
done what you do with all the social media stuff. You follow the show. Yeah. Now that because I started listening to we talked about Cal Newport's book Deep Work on the last episode. Cal Newport has a podcast called Deep Questions, and so I went and I was like, well, let me listen to the podcast, and if I like it, then I'll subscribe to it. And I liked it, and then I went to subscribe, and I'm like, what? Where is it? I'm like scrolling all over on my app, and I finally realized there's a button that says, plus sign and then follow. And I'm like, I don't want to get like emails or anything. What happened? Okay, all right. Well, I get all the new episodes. That's what. So they just swapped out that terminology. Okay. So now we have to say, hey, make sure you're following the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're getting. Which is they can't do this to us old time podcasters. You're trying to break habits that are 20 years ingrained nearly. But go ahead and follow us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you're watching this on YouTube, thank you to all of you who watch the videos, who leave comments over on YouTube. We read every single one of them, though I don't always respond. But make sure you're following, you're subscribing, or whatever it is that you're supposed to do, and the bells and the whistles and the subscribe forms and whatever it is. But thank you.
I'm a little uncomfortable with the word followers.
Yeah, me too.
Never sits right with me because I keep thinking, well, I know the one who matters, who had followers, is Jesus. He had followers, and disciples. And so that is the primary definition that my brain just wants to go to. So I feel a little uncomfortable that anyone follows me. It's like, I'm not worthy to be followed. I'm a follower.
Well,
that's who I am.
If you follow us, we immediately start questioning your character.
However, you just ask them to follow you.
I know.
Well, we're all on the way to Christ, you see.
I'm a walking set of contradictions. I'm used to saying things and then doing the complete and total.
Please just listen to us whatever way you want to.
But
that's what we want.
Thank you for the nice comment about your parents on EWTN. They're great folks over there. We'd love to be on as many EWTN programs as we can because it helps the apostolate, quite honestly. I mean, it really did.
We got
a huge influx.
A lot of Rosary requests, which has been super great. It's just exciting to just send them out because we know these are real people asking. That's not just a piece of paper in the mail, that it's a person that really wants to enrich their spiritual life and pray a rosary with us. And, well, not really with us, but they could if they listen to our audio and stuff.
If you didn't watch the show, the EWTN Journey Home episode, and you can find it, I posted it on Rosary Army's website. At one point in the episode, as we're talking about near the end, John Mark asked us about Rosary Army, and we were explaining how people can go to Rosary Army's website and enter in their email address and then print out a form and send us the form in the regular mail. And then we'll send a rosary. And then I made a comment. I said, or Jennifer will actually be the one to send out the rosary. And I just said that comment. Well, we have the mail delivered to a post office box, and so we have to go several times a week and collect the requests and bring them home, and then you process them from there. But I went to go pick up the mail, and I'm pulling it all out, and I'm just looking at the envelopes, and like one of the first envelopes on the top of the stack, it was addressed to Rosary Army, but above Rosary Army, it just said Jennifer, and there was a little heart next to it. I was like, I don't know how I feel about this. Someone and I'm not.
Did you think a dude? A man would be like making hearts? That's such a feminine giveaway.
I don't know.
Only girls do that.
I don't know, because I remember when we used to do that Catholic show that some creepy guys would say some creepy things about my wife online, and like one guy said, like, she's the bee's knees. And I'm like, well, who? Number one, who says that anymore? Number two, don't say that about my wife. But when I got that, I'm trying to be respectful, and I didn't answer it. I didn't open it. I waited until I got home so that you could see it.
And then you would not leave me until I opened it in your presence.
That was pretty much it. I just want to make sure it's like that. It's like,
and it was perfectly innocent.
So,
sweet lady.
It was a sweet lady.
I tickled her funny bone, apparently.
Yeah. So
I'm glad I made you smile.
Thank you for that. And now we're going to get a bunch of requests, and everyone's going to intentionally put a little heart and Jennifer on the envelope just to drive me nuts. Don't do that. We also got feedback from Cheryl. She sent in an email and said, since it's past May 1st, when the Barnes & Noble store opens, you probably know this already, you can share your Barnes & Noble card. So I guess we talked about that a little bit. You already had a card, and I mentioned that on the show. And yes, we have discovered that as well. We now have me and Jennifer and Lily all using the same number. She says, our Barnes & Noble is an hour away, so I shop there rarely. When I do, I always use my parents' card. I also use their book account, so all the books they buy electronically, I have access to, which is something that we do with Kindles. She says, I was really interested in this new Barnes & Noble concept and hope it's successful. Thanks for sharing. So we won't regurgitate all of what we said on a previous show of Barnes & Noble and how they're changing some of their business models and opening up stores that are different than the stores that you may be accustomed to. But we had the grand opening. We went up. And again, we knew it was at 10 o'clock. They're going to do a ribbon cutting. They had some local authors were going to be there for the ribbon cutting and book signing, and didn't know what to expect. And so, it's one of these things. I kind of hate being the one who cracks the whip to try to get out the door for things, right? And so as I'm getting older and as I'm kind of just being worn down, I stopped doing it. And I let it be known, a movie starts at this time. This is happening then. I say what the time is, and I say, here is my recommended time for when we should depart. Now, you've also gotten worn down because of my whip cracking over the years. And so I've noticed that I don't know if we're meeting in the middle or if we're both overcompensating, but you were like, well, you said we're leaving at 9:45, so we're leaving at 9:45. I was like, okay.
Like, we're ready. Let's go.
And so I said this, that it opens up at 10. I think about these things way too much. I overanalyze and overanticipate.
He expects tens of thousands of people to be there, that we won't get parking within miles of the place, is what he's thinking.
Wait a minute. I don't expect it. I
know it.
No, I don't even know it. But we've gone into enough of these things where we see that it's a possibility, right? And what my attitude is it never hurts us to arrive early, have to wait, and then not have any concerns. And we're not inconvenienced in any way just by showing up 10 minutes early for something. So I was like, I kind of saw how this was playing out. And I'm like, I've said it opens up at 10, whatever. I don't know if there's going to be giveaways. I don't know if they're going to do anything special, but there could be a line. I'm anticipating a line. And I think both you and Lily were kind of surprised. A line for a bookstore. I'm like, yeah, there's idiots like me that will do this, right? We want to be there at the opening. And I assume I'm not the only idiot around. And I was really pleased when we showed up. I wasn't the only idiot around.
There was a ton of idiots.
There was a really long line that went down past two other stores. And I think a lot of people in line were equally as surprised at the number of idiots that show up this early. So we were a line full of idiots waiting to get in. And people were excited, and it was really neat. And the manager came out, and he yelled something, but we were so far away that we could barely understand what he was saying. But what's interesting is we immediately started talking to this guy in front of us. I think he was probably, if I had to guess, like 15 years younger than us. But he was very excited by the bookstore, too. He and I were kind of on the same wavelength. We were very excited that there was not only a new bookstore opening up, but it was so close to our homes. And that it was we knew it was a different concept. We were excited.
So Greg was talking to a stranger. Happily.
Yeah.
Just want you to know that it is possible.
Well, because I knew I'd never see him again. Let's be honest.
Safe.
I mean, I have thought about him again. I mean, because I went to
he was a nice guy.
I went to the bookstore a couple days later. I was like, if I see that guy again, I need to say something. Yeah. Because we kept running into each other in the store. But anyway, my point in bringing him up is, you know how if you go out to eat and or you and I will do this, right? We'll go to a coffee place and we'll get a coffee and we want to try this new coffee. They got this new, I don't know, kombucha coffee. I don't know if we want, hold on, just bear with me.
Yes.
I don't know if we want to commit to this kombucha coffee, right? Or you just made a protein shake. Let's do that.
Okay.
You made a protein shake. This is the first time you've ever made this protein shake. It's not the first time. Well, let's pretend it is. And if I had made this protein shake, let me have your glass. If I had made this, here's what I oftentimes do. I'll do a new recipe, made the protein shake. I'm like, and before I take my sip, I'm like, you want to try it? And I will offer it.
This is so true. Whenever he makes anything new, you eat it first.
And it's not.
You do it.
Listen, it's not that I'm treating you like the king's,
No, I think you're
tester.
afraid.
No, I'm saying that's not what's happening. But I do want to make sure that you like something first, and then if you like it, I'm like, okay, well then I think I'm probably gonna like it too. And so it's like a little bit of a relief if I like it. Because if I drink it and I'm like, oh yeah, it's really good. You might not. I don't know. It does something in my brain, right?
I like it, but you may not like it. Okay. So what does this have to do with books?
But the flip, because the flip side can happen is that if you go, ugh, and then I'm very hesitant now to take a sip of this thing. And I'm like, oh, see, I was hoping it was going to be good. It's not, oh, yeah, you're right. It's not good.
Is this part of the one flesh rule of married life?
No.
We are now one.
No.
Our taste buds are one.
Because now I'm going to bring it back to the guy in the line who I'm not one with. Who said something literally, we're waiting in line, and they open up the doors. There's probably like 30 people ahead of us, and we're all, making our way to the door, and the doors open up, and just as the guy and then me were walking through the door. He went, "It's like an airport bookstore."
Oh, I'm glad I didn't hear that.
And then that's all I thought while I was walking through. I'm like, it is like an airport bookstore. It's like all this lighter shade of wood.
Yes.
And the shelves are they're
very flat.
Yeah, they're not like library type bookshelves that a lot of Barnes Nobles have right now. Now, having said that, I really do like the way that they lay it out. They don't, at least in this store, it's much smaller. They did not have a cafe inside, so they're not taking up that real estate. Every bit of real estate is pretty much devoted to books. Now, they did have
and media.
They had music, but not a ton. They had a lot of Legos, like these special collector's edition Lego sets that I'll probably never buy there because, well, I'll never buy those collector sets. But they were unique. They had some weird ones that were neat. But all of the sections, even though it's in a smaller location, because of the way that they laid out the bookshelves so that you feel like you're walking through a maze more. And so in that maze, you're constantly making discoveries.
Yes.
And then it's easy. They had chairs in different places, and it was easy to kind of put myself in a little bit of a nook in a corner and kind of look through the shelves and that kind of thing. Now, so it was a neat experience going into it, and I very much liked the cleanliness. I liked the way that they have not as many copies of each book, and so they have a lot more books facing outward, which was interesting. Now, the downside, I immediately saw that their classics section was very much lacking. They have a lot of classics mixed up with just regular general fiction, but even still, we've kind of gotten spoiled of going into bookstores, and there will be 2 or 3 or 4 different editions of classic books, depending upon the paper type and how much money you want to spend in that kind of thing. And so I felt like that was limited in the classics section area. And on
that note, I felt that it looked like somebody had to make a decision about how to handle those redecorated covers on these classic works. Like, you've seen them if you've been into a bigger Barnes and Noble.
Well, they're Barnes and Noble editions. That Barnes and Noble publishes those fancy cover books,
right? Like all the Jane Austen books all have these very particular style of hard cover that's very decorative, very floral, and they're kind of telling you, this is what you want. I felt like they were pushing that decor, that artistic style onto us as if that is the only way you're going to enjoy this particular classic work. But if you don't like it, you're like, oh, well, what if I don't want that?
Yeah.
I don't care about the cover. What I care about really is the color of paper you use to print your font, and is it a good size? Is it like going to absorb light in a favorable way to reading? Because
you don't like newsprint.
I don't like the gray paperback sort of style. It's just and actually that would be, I would think, relaxing for the eyes because that's a very low contrast sort of page. But I love whatever is kind of, I feel like it's just in the last 8 to 10 years, this kind of cream ivory paper with it has a good weight to it, and the font is just perfect. It's my favorite. I don't know what it is, but they know what it is, and you can only find it when you have a chance to crack the cover and explore, is this publisher using that or not? And so, you have to you just can't buy a lot of online books anymore because you're never going to see what's inside, the paper, the font, the size. So I wasn't so sure I liked their forcing that particular hardbook cover style of classical novel onto us. I did miss the other editions to shop through. It's like, okay, this is the edition I want. So anyway, you were going to point out something else.
The thing with the you just said buying them online is difficult. One of the things that they said is, again, because the manager has more authority of ordering based upon the things that are requested, we made sure we spoke with the manager, we introduced ourselves, we talked about some of the things that we really would like to see more of, mentioned the classics, but really mentioned, and it was great because the local book buyer was there. I almost stopped again, by the way, last night just to see if anything has changed in the week since they've opened up, because we had the opportunity to talk to the local regional book buyer as well as the manager. The religious book section was one of the smallest I've ever seen in a bookstore. And they didn't have a single Catholic Bible on the shelves. They had a lot of Bibles, but they were all Protestant Bibles. So they were the ones that had the 7 books removed by Martin Luther.
Right, and they have a lot of Joyce Meyer stuff.
Lots of Joyce Meyer.
I was like, wow.
A lot of Joel
She's
Osteen.
well represented here.
Which is, this Bible Belt, so I'm not surprised by that. But the only Catholic-related books, there were a couple of biographies of Pope Francis. I saw St. Augustine's Confessions, but it was on the lower quality paper that you talked about, and a couple other St. Augustine books.
And a lot of C.S. Lewis.
A lot of C.S. Lewis.
Which was nice.
Which on the good paper, that whatever the Signet Classics are, I think that's the imprint that's been doing it in the recent years. They've done a really good job of reprinting the Lewis stuff on high quality paper, and it's just nice to read. So I was disappointed on the religious section. I was disappointed on the classics. But having said that, what I liked was the way that they've set up things for discoverability. So I walked through and I was looking at a lot of things. I ended up buying a writing book that I was back at the writing section, which was also very small. And again, because it's a smaller bookstore, they're not going to have every book known to man. But using their app, you can request books and that kind of thing. So I'm still getting used to it. But I really did enjoy the experience. I went back a couple days later and spent probably a good hour just in the fiction section, just like kind of went across the entire shelves, there were so many books and authors that I'm not even aware of their existence right now, but seeing how they're intermixing the classics that they do have with those, I'm really excited. I'm very glad that it's there.
And I was very surprised by the titles they ultimately went with to stock that store, because that's not an easy decision. And I remember the woman who was the book buyer, or one of the regional managers, she said, so for a store opening, either it's 70,000 pounds of books or 70,000 books. She said 70,000 something goes into an opening. And you have all this data that you have to analyze, like which one is likely to sell.
Yeah.
What are the good sellers? And that's what you start with. But then you wonder about how quickly they'll replace. So you found something that you knew Tommy was going to go gaga for, but there was one copy left. And did you go back and see if they restocked it?
When I went back on Friday, they had not restocked it. So, and I explained that to you, that I actually worked in a bookstore back in 1989, fairly large store, and way back then, their policy was within 48 hours, a book would be restocked and back in again. And that was a small chain in Ohio, Little Professor. If you're from Ohio, that'll be familiar to you. And so I'm just, I don't know why I'm always curious about the inner workings of like how this business works. And I don't care about all businesses, but I am very interested. And so like last night, I almost went back again just to see. I bought, for example, I purchased Cal Newport's Slow Productivity book that I mentioned on the last show. They hadn't restocked that either. And so I'm just curious what the turnaround times are once a book is purchased, because they only had one copy of Slow Productivity. They had one copy of that other book. So it's interesting. I'm very glad it's there, and
it definitely, they put a lot of thought into the flow of the store, and so it was nice how fiction was sort of everywhere in multiple hiding places, and so then you would have no choice but to walk by another section that you may not have thought to go to, but then it just looks so pleasing in its decor. Like, okay, I'll look at it and see what's here that might be of interest to me.
And that leads back to the discoverability, the way that they have it set up. Yeah. I think it's designed in a way so that you kind of feel like you could almost go every week and you might see something that you didn't see the week before. Now, we don't need to buy a book every week because we can't read that fast.
Right.
But so we got some books. We're excited that it's there, and we'll give you future Barnes and Noble updates.
So on the topic of books, what are you reading now?
I'm reading.
Are you reading anything fiction right now?
Well, funny enough, last night I just started reading another book on my Kindle that I got from the library, based upon, because it became available. It had been recommended to me a couple weeks ago. And so I started reading that. I read the first few pages of Power and Glory, the Graham Greene book that you got me.
Okay.
And I feel like there's something else. I feel like you're setting me up for a question that
No, I wasn't sure if you were reading something new that's fiction related, because I know you're always working on.
Yeah. So last night I started
books.
reading a book that Dave from Fiveable, the group that set us up with School of Mary. He had recommended a book to me, and so I almost got at the bookstore, and I think I've read this, and then when I talked to him again, I don't think I did. So I picked that up on Kindle and started reading that last night.
Well,
what about you?
Well, I'm getting ready to.
Oh, you got your mom's well-read moms
the well-read
thing.
mom. So I'm keeping up with the assigned books that are part of that book club. So that's been a very enjoyable experience. I'm very, very glad that I am, in fact, able to do it, that I could read a book well within the 30-day allotted time. And many times I can finish it inside of a week if I'm really loving it. But
You're
now,
a lot faster of a reader than I remember.
I think I've become faster. I definitely was a slow reader before I joined this group. So something about the pressure has just gave me a reason to try. And so because of this bookstore opening up and just how fun it was to go to that book opening with Lily, we thought, you know what? Let's have an eye toward our summer. Let's create our own summer reading list for fun. Not anything to do with an assignment, no questions to answer.
Who, you and Lily?
Just Lily and me. Just what do we want to read this summer? Like the polls, just opened for us where we live. I mean, we haven't been yet, but we will. And but we would love to sort of like have a nice lazy summer with, obviously we'll be working, but when we go to the pool, it'd be nice to have a book to read. And I realize my time is sort of, running out with Lily. I mean, this is like the last year where her schedule and mine could be this open for summer because obviously she's getting older and she's still doing well with her driving lessons. So once she, has access to a car to drive, she can get a job outside of the house. And, if you have teens, once that happens, there is a change in how often the kid is home. And
you say that, but I think it's going to be different with Lily.
I realize that there is perhaps a fork in the road that's on the near horizon. So I thought, you know what? Because I see that, I want to savor. I want to savor this year and maybe don't do anything crazy. I mean, yeah, we'll try to explore some parts of the state, whatever, for the summer. But I just want to enjoy being with her right now as much as I can. So we thought we'd do some reading this summer.
Yeah. Well, speaking of reading, we also got this bit of voicemail feedback, so you might want to stick your ears back in.
Hello, Greg and Jennifer. I appreciated your episode on therapeutic moral deism, and I appreciate it even more. You're launching off into discussion of books and sort of changing the culture by suggesting things in bookstores and building up the culture in terms of your book requests. And I think that's a great idea. But I want to add another suggestion. Your local libraries, to be persistent with your local libraries about what you want to see on the shelf. And if they are doing their job, they should note your interest, and that old saying, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. You should be able to find your books at the library if you are persistent enough. And of course, they have a budget. But then also what you can do with a local library is you can donate your books. It doesn't mean that they won't wind up in the book sale, but you could start kind of doing that kind of thing and engaging in conversations with the people who work there so they know that, there are Catholics in the area who want to see certain things on the shelf. It is interesting. There are many groups in society that don't keep their mouths shut, and they're always talking, and they get a lot of cultural notice. But, as Catholics, I don't see that as much in terms of asking sort of the purveyors of culture, popular culture, to cater to some of our requests. But just doing that simple thing at Barnes & Noble, I think, is really important and really valuable. I will tell you, you probably don't know a lot about the book publishing industry, but there are the main corporate book publishers are in New York, and I think there's a whole total of 4 of them still left. And then you have lots and lots of little independent presses. Well, maybe not lots, but you have independent presses out there, and Catholic independent presses as well. And libraries, like anything else, or bookstores, they go basically to the corporate collective blob, and they order corporately through major book vendors and what have you. And so those corporate things from the corporate publishers, really most of them from a certain point of view, are what they're going to get because it's just easier that way. Unless local people speak up about what they want from local institutions, they're just not going to get it. That's my perspective as a librarian. I do try to be very aware of some of the really dreadful things. You're just talking about books for adults, but many of the titles from children's titles produced by this corporate blob are just dreadful. I won't say anything more about that. I do try to, when I can, put better things on the shelf for my young patrons, but it's not easy to search those titles out, and I don't get much support from the blob. So God bless you guys for all you do and for giving me something to think about. Toodles.
Thanks, Mary. Yeah, there were definitely, signs of books that I wish weren't in the bookstore. There was like 2 full shelves of books devoted to witchcraft, for example, and modern day witchcraft stuff. And it kind of surprised me. a whole display of tarot cards and all these kinds of things. And again, I think it points to, well, what Mary was saying and what we said in the last episode of how much are we going to be witness out in the world, and part of it is by the way that we spend our money. And so I'm a proponent when it seems appropriate to boycott something. But I've always been more of a fan of an othercott. We've talked about that years ago. I mean, early on in Rosary Army, we were talking about when a certain movie was opening up, if it had, I think it was even like maybe back when the Da Vinci Code opened up, it was going to be the #1 movie. Well, we proposed an othercott the same weekend. I think Over the Hedge, an animated movie, was opening up. It was like, let's all go see Over the Hedge and bump that up. And I think an othercott rather than a boycott can yield benefits. So if we go and we purchase the books that we think we want to see more of, well, then maybe there'll be less of the other books eventually, and God can work in those kinds of things.
And we did. I think we did a pretty good job of trying to let that book buyer regional, manager lady who was at the Barnes & Noble, like helping to run that opening. And we told her, here are the authors that we would love to see on your shelves, because she didn't know anything about Michael O'Brien and all of that fiction series, Fulton Sheen. And so she's like, all right, give me the names. She was very open to all of our suggestions. What?
She knew Chesterton.
Yeah. And again, sometimes they don't know until you tell them. So it's good to tell them so that they can, you have a chance to affect the culture. But I'm glad she brought up libraries. I know we have a local library, but I don't go. It's like not in my brain to go. And I don't know, I used to. When our kids were small, we would see that as a place to go with kids.
My problem, I used to use a library a lot more. I use the library a lot for Kindle books, electronic books. I really enjoy the electronic offerings that libraries offer now. I have in the past used it also for graphic novels and that kind of thing. I like that. My problem is I'm a bit of a slower reader because, and this kind of goes to deep work, I'm trying really hard not to read too many books simultaneously the last couple of weeks. I'm trying to spend concentrated time every day focusing on a particular nonfiction book that I'm trying to work my way through, because it felt great to finish deep work in a week. When I go to a library and I check out a book, I oftentimes can't finish it in time, and I keep having to renew it, or I end up with late fees. It's been a long time since I actually finished a book, a physical book that I got from the library. Maybe that's something I can retrain myself for. I don't know. But good feedback, Mary. Great hearing from you, as always. We have actually another piece of feedback we'll share with her in a little bit, but it's email, not voicemail.
Okay.
I got a message on using a service that I never use. I go and I check LinkedIn maybe every couple of weeks, just on the off chance someone tries to contact me through LinkedIn. I do not like LinkedIn. If you want to contact me and you don't care about ever getting a response, LinkedIn is a great LinkedIn's a great way of reaching out. But someone who we actually know IRL in real life, and we've known him since he was a little kid in an altar server at a parish we went to years ago. That's the way that he and I have communicated a few times over the years. This is Andrew G. I'll just say as the last initial from Andrew G. from our old parish. Andrew reached out to me. He actually listened to our show where we talked about moralistic therapeutic deism, and he said, listening to your podcast about therapeutic moralistic deism, I haven't finished it yet, but just reading the title made my brain go, someone finally said it. He said, I'm just super stoked. Someone is finally calling out this specifically in Catholic podcast land. He said, I recommend you get a copy of this book from the new Barnes & Noble. Excuse me for, I keep coughing and clearing my throat the last couple of episodes, because I realize that I keep mowing the grass the night before we do a show, and then this happens. But he said chapter 6 in this book, it's called The Religious Sense by Luigi Giussani. He says chapter 6 talks about some of what we were talking about in that last episode.
Wow. Well, one, I am super delighted that you listened to our show and that particular episode really struck a chord with you. And see, we're just on the same wavelength. Yeah. We see it too, and it just sort of drives us a little crazy. But it is a hard thing to talk about because you want to speak about it from a very charitable place, and because you could very easily get angry and then, lose track of your loving nature, right? We're supposed to attract people with love and truth, not beat them over with a bat of truth. That's sometimes the battle.
Now, in regards to our conversation on deep work, Mary, who we just heard her voicemail, she sent another email about that and said, thank you guys for your podcast on deep work. Much to chew on and ponder. 2 things she said. Number 1, Lectio Divina. It's taken me literally years to get this method of prayer, but has been more fruitful than anything else I have done. We should probably talk about Lectio Divina again. We haven't done that in quite some time.
Yeah, we should do it.
We should do it more too. Slowing down, she says, with Scripture, learning to ponder in silence, reading slowly and deeply. This, for me, is truly life-changing. I can't recommend it enough. And then she pointed to a recent Father Mike Schmidt's homily from the 6th Sunday of Easter, where he talks about the real benefits of aging, accumulation of wisdom, and beginning again. She said, Greg mentioned being worried about not being able to learn or do the hard stuff anymore. This homily was helpful to me when I contemplate my own. And thank you, Mary, for that email. So, one of the things that, again, trying to do the deep work and trying to learn things and reading all these books and things like Lectio Divina, and you read Scripture, or you go to Mass and you hear something that really sticks out at you and you want to try to remember it. The other night, I walked into the Rosary Army office downstairs, and you were sitting in there and you were working on the book that you're reading right now for Well-Read Mom, and you've developed this new way of tracking things that lately that isn't Post-it notes, and it's not a dedicated notebook, but it's kind of a in-between.
It is an in-between. So basically what I'm doing is, as I'm reading this particular work, there are certain passages that just sort of leap out at me for whatever reason. Maybe it's just excellent prose, or man, this is a relatable thing, or what this author has written makes me think of this bit of reference from my own faith, and I want to share that in an upcoming meeting. So I need a way of tracking that, but I don't really want to annotate all over this book, so I'm trying to minimize my writing and making scribbles and underlining. But I'm also trying to break my habit of overusing post notes because Greg is not a fan of that. I've noticed.
I don't like post notes,
and I completely get that. So I thought, I know that they make a post note that actually looks like a little 5x7 legal pad, but that the whole page is basically like a post note. So what I will do is I'll take about maybe 6 of those, and it's lined, and So I ordered it on Amazon, and I put it on the inside cover of the book that I'm reading. So when I open up the cover, the first thing I see are like 7 pages of these lined post notes that are all neatly sort of laying in there, and they have that same typical post note adhesion, right? But then I can just write there and write the page number, write my thought or reflection, and it doesn't make the book feel overly fat. I'm not going to lose it. I don't have to worry about carrying a secondary journal book, because that was the other problem. I would grab another book, but then I'd leave that book somewhere, and I would constantly misplace it. I just wanted something to stay in the book I was reading at the time. When I'm done, I can throw it away. So you saw me doing that, and you had some light bulb go off in your brain, and I said, no, stop it. Don't tell me.
Yeah.
Save it for the show. Now you can tell me what you wanted to tell me the other day.
Well, about a year ago, and it was right after Ben came home from college last year, we had to drive him to his job because he was still working on getting his license. And we ended up working, and listeners will remember this. You and I were taking turns going and working at like a
pop-up office, one of those
pop-up office type thing, right?
Rent the office for the day kind of a place.
So we were doing that, and while I was there, I started to read a couple of different books that were helping me to figure out how can I analog track different things, my thoughts and various things that I was starting to track using Notion. So there's a difference between tracking things electronically and tracking things analog, in a book that there's some things that you just want with you all the time. One of the things that both you and I started doing several years ago was we started taking notes at Mass. We would have a journal. We would bring it with us when we go to church. If something struck us during the homily, we would write that down so that we could remember
more you than me. This is really your thing.
Yeah. And just doing that exercise was something that yielded fruit, because how often do we go to Mass and we walk away and we say, wow, that was a great homily, but I can't remember a thing that was said. Mm-hmm. And then midway through the week, you try to recall it and you can't. And so what I found is that when I started writing down things that were important to me, if I had them in a central place, it was helpful to be able to go back and find these things later on. The problem is I was mixing up the things that I heard within my own personal journal, within notes that I was writing about a particular project. If I just needed to write down a quick grocery list or whatever it was, everything was getting mixed up. It was hard to refer back to some of these things later on. And so any notes that I took during Mass weren't as helpful as they could have been. If I saw something when I was reading, I might have underlined it in a book, and then that book goes on the shelf, and I lost that. And if I highlighted something on my Kindle, well, it's on those notes there. So I had all these notes in all these different places, and there are electronic solutions for bringing those things together, but I don't want to be using electronics when I'm at church or if I go to adoration. I don't want to have that. Then I started seeing different videos from people who are practicing sort of a modern day version of Stoicism. This idea of trying to think deeper thoughts, to be able to allow yourself time to mull over deep thoughts and deep work, as we talked about last week. Seeing quotes of great meaning, and you might say, that's a great quote. I can see how that applies to my life. But you want to give it some time to sit there and think about it. Meanwhile, we're all using our phones as crutches when we're waiting in line or we're stuck at stoplights. You don't want to be pulling out a book, but if you're waiting for a kid at school and you're just waiting for them to get out, we pull out our phone versus actually diving into maybe something that could be yielding greater fruit and helping us to grow, right? And so you're going through this book right now and you're writing all these great quotes on these pieces of paper that might get left behind, or I might have underlined in that book something that 6 months from now, if I saw that quote again, it might basically help retrain me and help me grow, like weightlifting, to revisit these quotes that spoke to our hearts when we first saw them or read them or heard them, but then they just dissipate. But if we have them all in a single place, rather than doom scrolling through a Twitter feed, what if we had a way of having all of these meaningful quotes or things that we heard at a homily all in one place, even if they're somewhat disjointed from one another? And so if you had that and we got into practices of revisiting these important, meaningful lessons that we've learned, how much more ingrained they'll get in our hearts and our minds. Same, it works with scripture quotes, it works with productivity quotes, it works with all sorts of things. So one of the things I wanted to, did you?
Well, actually, I did want to make a comment about this. Sometimes there is a resistance to deep work. Like, you can kind of tell when you're sitting in a car waiting for somebody and you know you only have like 10 minutes to sit there. There are times you might go, I don't want to go too deep. I need something superficial. What's something superficial that I can do that's like meaningless? Oh, I'll pull out my phone and scroll.
Sure.
And so there's a time when you don't want to do deep work. So the problem
and I'm not saying deep work. I'm saying deep thoughts.
Deep focus.
Yeah.
Or surrender.
Not even focus. Deep thoughts.
Deep thoughts.
And deep thoughts, I think, can be done anywhere. Deep thoughts can happen when you're walking.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Deep thoughts you ponder. When you're driving, you can think deep thoughts.
Yes.
Right?
Okay.
So it's different. I don't want that to confuse it with last week's topic.
Fair enough. But one moment that I experienced when I was writing a note about something I read in that most recent book that I just read, and I thought, you know what? I obviously felt strong enough about what I read to make a comment and write it down. I think the next step, I need to feel this. I actually want to try to sit in this thought and feel it, knowing that it was a sad reality that I was pondering, because I think in this age, we are awfully desensitized to bad things happening in our world. They are just constant headlines. And we're like, oh, well, another bomb went off over there, or shooting over there. And you feel sad for like maybe a few seconds. And then you're like, okay, but I have to go over to the store and pick up food. Like, this is how we process bad news. But I thought, no, I need to stop. I need to stop moving, stop my motion, and rest with this. And try to imagine what it would have been like to feel exactly this thing. And it does change you. It becomes transformative. It increases your appreciation for what the author was trying to say. Like, don't forget the atrocities of the past, the lessons that we could learn. Rest in that. Try to imagine what it would have been like to live in that world during that time, during this war, without all the communication that we have today. And so that made it a much more meaningful experience. So I definitely see that there is a value to stopping, reflecting, going deep really is what we need to do more of.
And last year when we were having to work off-site, when we were helping Ben, I started reading a book about building a second brain by a guy named Tiago Forte. I started to try to cobble together. I've always, and this has sort of been a years-long quest of cobbling together customized notebooks. I've had different systems that I've created over the years, but I've never had one that I really felt worked well for me. And so one of the things that I started to do was something that I think was recommended in that Tiago Forte book, but I also saw a lot of YouTube videos on, of creating something called a commonplace book and the benefit of a commonplace book. And what a commonplace book is basically it's a repository of all of these great thoughts and quotes and passages that you have collected that mean something to you, that have meaning in your life, and you put them all into a common place. That's why that has that name. And so one of the things I started to do was last year I started changing the way I gathered the notes and the things that I want to collect and always have with me in an analog format, because I can access analog just about everywhere, but I can't access digital everywhere. And so I'm going to switch on a different camera here, and I'm actually going to, for those of you who are watching on the YouTube, you get to see this, but what I've done is I have a series of notebooks with different purposes, all within a journal. And so I have one notebook that is all my notes, and you'll see a tab. I actually have a common book area in here, and I have a mass notes area in here as well that I want to talk about. I have another journal that is just my journal. It's my private thoughts. It's basically me processing things on a daily basis. And then I had a last one, which I've just recently been experimenting and tried to replace it, which is just a place for me to do sketches and that kind of thing. And then I have another place to I keep my business cards, or not my business cards, but Rosary Army stickers and stuff, so that when I meet someone and I want them to have a contact of how to reach out to us, I'll give them one of those things. So that's the basics of it. And I always have a pencil and a pen with it. Now, you wanted to say something, I could tell.
I thought the entire thing was your commonplace book.
No.
Because everything is in there. It's the commonplace that holds information.
Because I want my commonplace book to be where I keep the thoughts that are meaningful, that instead of doom scrolling, I can go and revisit those important,
meaningful thoughts,
those
to
meaningful
you.
Quotes and things that I've read.
Gotcha.
So when I walked in the other night and I saw you writing all those things down, what I wanted for you, now you may not want it for you, but what I wanted for you was for you to have a place where all of the quotes and things that you're writing down now in that book are in one book, that when you pick up your next book, you write down the thoughts right after that in that book. And so that at some point, you can go back to that book that's not a journal, it's not a personal journal of your thoughts of what happened today or whatever, but it's just those thoughts. And now you have a common place where all of the meaningful things that you've read are all in one place. Now, I don't mind showing what I've actually put into my commonplace in my journal itself. So like over here, I have and I've learned a lot, by the way. You'll see a lot of my mistakes that I've made in the last year. This is sort of, I will call this beta 1, right? My prototype. What I realized is I don't want to share my commonplace book with all of my to-do lists for for School of Mary. I need to have a separate standalone little notebook that's my to-do lists, my brain dump, my random things that once I write them down, if I were to lose that or throw it away a year from now, it doesn't matter. But I want to keep all of my journal entries, my personal journal entries, and I want to keep all of my mass notes, and I want to keep my commonplace things. And so where can I put these things? And so I just hold on for a minute, because things are going to become evident in a moment. But like here I have, something from The Devout Life by Deacon Matthew Newsom. We just did a learning path on School of Mary. But when I started reading that book, I put a quote over there, and then I realized I needed to switch over to something else for that. But the Commonplace, I have a quote from Andrew Huberman, which is about health, which is followed by a De Montfort, 4 Points of Perfect Christianity. Put that right underneath that. I have a scripture passage from Ecclesiastes right after that. I have, and this is where my mass notes started to transform in this book. I wrote a note, something that our priest said in a homily. And I put his name and I put the date that he said it. And he said, "Don't be so open-minded that your brain falls out." And I thought, that's a great quote. I want to put that down. I want to remember that quote. And then I have 1 Corinthians, and then I have a quote from Lonesome Dove, right? So all these mismatch. But great quote from the book Lonesome Dove. This is my favorite quote in the whole book. Hold on. "If he thinks he wants to rent a pig, he's not a man I'd want for a customer," Call said. Means nothing to nobody. But I love that quote, and I wrote it down, and I want to read it again.
Okay. In order for you to do what you're doing, you really have to have this journal kind of with you at all times, because you're moving around, you're changing your location. So this has to follow you.
Which has not been difficult for me to have, because this has become my journal, my personal journal. It's been my commonplace book. It's been where I put my work notes and that kind of thing. However, and I'm going to get to a new solution that I personally have been experimenting with that apply to you and apply to people listening, because not everyone's going to build out a journal like this, right? But I have all these different quotes based off of books that I've been, like, here's my deep work notes that I put on here, right? Now, here's the problem that I've run into. This book, this insert in my overall journal has gotten filled up, and I need to replace it. And I realized, oh no, I'm not going to have all of my common book quotes in my mass note quotes in here anymore. I have to start over. But the problem is I have some pages that are still empty in here. It's just got mixed matched. Right. And I realized I need to have just one insert that will allow me to do that. But I don't want it to be too big, because these inserts that you buy are typically a lot of pages, and so they have a thickness to them, and so I'm limited on what I could put in here. So I'll jump to the end. I've started making. Now I'm not selling these. I'm not trying to convince you to do this yourself.
But he was driven.
But I was driven. How do I make smaller ones that are limited pages? Because what I went and counted, how many pages have I actually used in the last year for writing down mass notes? And let me show that as well, real quick in this example. I have mass notes, and you'll see I only have like a paragraph or so for what the priest is saying at church. I just write down. I don't write down everything. I just write down the parts that are really interesting to me. Well, there's another page somewhere in here. Hold on. I have a better page. I've already lost it when I go to do this each week. Well, it doesn't matter. See, I'm taking too much time. All right. Anyway, see, this is what the Barons do. All right, there.
Just blame the Barons.
I just have like single paragraphs or so of what the priest said at Mass, right?
Yeah.
These just mean something to me. But I've gone back and I've read through these. And so I'm able to revisit, what did our priest say back in November that struck me in his homily back in November? I can tell you what the priest talked about when I dropped Ben off and we went to church in St. Joseph, Missouri last August. I wrote down what that priest was talking about, and I can go back and so these meaningful things that will all help build up my spirituality are there, or build up my intellectual life are all there in a single place. So here's what I'm going to do. I created, I basically figured out a way of printing out the grid. I like grid paper, printing out grid paper the way that I like. And then I went online and I watched a YouTube video of how to bind my own book, and I figured out how to do it in this size. And so I made a smaller one that will just be a commonplace book.
Okay.
It's only going to be dedicated so I won't intersperse my work notes and to-do lists in one. I'm going to have a separate small book for to-do lists that will probably get filled up in 2 months, and then I'll toss it and I'll put a new one in. But my commonplace book will have a longer life. it probably will last for a couple of years. It'll take me a while to fill all this up, probably. And then, but even if I do, here's the great thing. I can start making a collection of just my Commonplace books and put them on the shelf. So anytime I want to go back and revisit these things from past years, I can start going back and reliving the meaningful things that meant something to me, and it's not mixed up with my journal ideas or my thoughts of what what the weather was like or whatever.
No, that's good.
It's just these mass notes and Commonplace notes.
You can put like a nice label on the outside cover with a date range,
and you can
volume
put
one.
flower stickers or whatever you want. So what I was going to say to you, Jennifer, was this is about the size it fits inside of a book while you're reading it.
Okay.
And so then you're not really carrying it if you didn't want to.
Right.
If you didn't want to have something as large as what I have, to your point. And then as soon as you finish the book,
move it
you
to the
just
next
move
book.
it to the next book. And then you always have that. You just need a pen or a pencil.
Yeah.
And so I was actually going to offer one of these to you. I was offering to make one for you because it's not as unwieldy as the size of a journal, and it fits into a book. Then if you're looking on YouTube, you see how it just slipped right in there, and you could that could be your bookmark, right? You could replace whatever, in my case, a receipt.
Yeah.
And then now it fits right into the size of most books these days.
Well, I mean, that's actually it is better because one, it's a little bit more permanent of a thing.
Yeah.
And I realized the flaw of my plan right away. It's like, well, what am I doing? I have the post notes and then
what?
This is your number one complaint of post notes is it becomes forgettable. You misplace it. You just stop seeing it. And then you won't refer to it ever again. But a book has permanence. So I like that idea.
And one of the other ideas that I've learned from the Commonplace rabbit hole that I went down of learning about this, there are services that will allow you to pull from your Kindle and if you want. So how do you deal with those kinds of things, right? Your electronic notes, or if you do underline in a book, what's the best way of going about doing that? One of the ways that you could do that, if you don't want to carry one of those journals with you all the time, then go back to underlining the things that you see. And before you move on to your next book, simply allow yourself the time, 15 minutes, 30 minutes, however long it takes, to sit down with your Commonplace book and the book that you're reading and go through and revisit everywhere you underlined and start writing those things down in your Commonplace book so you have those. I actually did that as well in the book Life of Union with Mary that I was reading last year. I have a whole page and a half where I went back to the areas that I underlined and I revisited and put it down. Well, that sounds like homework. Well, why do we
it's
read?
For you.
Why do we read in the first place if not to grow?
Okay. I have a
right?
question about when you come across a piece of written, prose or whatever, and you're like, wow, I gotta have this. But it's like super long and huge because all of it was amazing and you don't want to shave off not even 2 sentences, the whole thing you needed for context. Would you rewrite that word for word, even if it feels like a whole page is dedicated to one quote?
The way I would answer that is this way. I am, in the back of my mind, I'm thinking about something that you probably aren't, which is, could I use this as a quote in a future newsletter, article, book, or talk? If I am going to do that, I want to capture it word for word, and I want to put down the author, the source, and even the page number if applicable. And so when I go through and I'm capturing things, if it's something I just want for my own knowledge sake, then then just paraphrase. Okay. And so that's what I've done a lot with deep work, where it's like I've summarized the points that I may have a hard time remembering. So I'm reading a book right now on novel writing and just structure, a different type of structure. And so they have like 15 beats that they explain. Well, I haven't written down, I haven't even underlined, and I'm like 60, 70 pages into this book now. I haven't underlined a single thing. I'm actually waiting because I already know that I want to get all 15 of those beats. I'm just going to write them down. I think I'll know them well enough, but I just need to be reminded, I will know what each one of them means well enough that if I just write down what they are at the end of it. So I'm kind of reserving writing down those 15 points. I'll paraphrase all of those. So if that makes sense. So
yes, it does. Thank you.
I don't see you necessarily wanting to capture, that whole quote because you're going to quote it in a book or whatever later on.
Right. Which begs the question, why am I rewriting the entire thing? Like,
right. But
what is it about it that made me like it so much?
In the case of like that Lonesome Dove quote that I just read, I don't want to paraphrase that because it was such a well-written line that I will write that down word for word.
One thing that I've been impressed by with you is that you've never seemed to have lost or misplaced this very irreplaceable thing that you have here. I've seen the look of horror on your face if you feel like, where is it? Oh my gosh, where's my journal? Because it is a thing of beauty. It's just this cool leather, sort of weathered looking construction. And I'm telling you, guys who see my husband with this always ask him about it. It's super attractive, especially I think to college-aged males. They see that like, wow, that looks really cool. I want to write deep thoughts in something that looks like that. It's just pretty nice. So you've never lost it. I'm a little worried that I would misplace. I have way too many journals that I've started with the best of intentions thinking, this is going to be the journal. I can tell. We're going to bond. This book and me, we're inseparable. And then I just put it down and forget all about it. I lose it in my house. Like, oh. And so I guess I'm not really ready for a journal if I'm
that's why the smaller thing that I've created.
That's more appealing.
Which again, I apologize for those of you who are listening and don't know what I'm talking about, but it's basically I created a little notebook that you could literally use. You could use staples to staple this together.
Yeah, it's like a thick brochure if you're not seeing this.
But what I like it. I like these things to look nice, and so like I've bothered with the stitching, and I've learned a simple saddle stitch to be able to stitch together and bind a book, and it's high quality paper. It's 24-pound paper, and then cardstock cover. These I can have a ton of these things, and they're gonna be durable. I could smack them around like I'm doing right now, and they last. And I like that. I like the fact that it's handcrafted.
I love that you did it. I mean, it's just like it's such a cool idea. It wouldn't even have occurred to me.
Let me tell you
to do that.
I have gone down. I keep talking about rabbit holes in this episode. I've gone down the rabbit hole of watching leather work. I want to start making journals like this myself. I find it fascinating, but the startup costs are probably
for the leather.
Not just the leather, but a lot of the cutting material and the stitching material. I've watched a lot of leather stitching, but like this is a very simple journal cover that I have. Quite honestly, I would like to make it a little bit manlier, but the startup cost would probably be a couple $100, and I just haven't been able to pull that trigger.
So we saw another gentleman at Mass who we wondered, did he see you and copy you when he bought one? I don't know. Or maybe he's been at it for 2 years. We just not noticed that he had one.
I don't know.
But his had like a leather flap that went around that actually covered the opening of where you would access the pages. And I thought, ooh, that's kind of a nice touch. Like, would you want that? Do you see that as a favorable feature to have like that wraparound sort of cover?
No, but there's not really. I've gotten very used to the way that I just have a single band around mine, and it holds in my. I have two little clips for my pen and pencil. The flap I think would just be extra, but I do like. I've seen what they have a pocket that's stitched onto the inside, and that's something I think would be beneficial because I'm constantly getting business cards or whatever, and I want to keep track, or a prayer card, and I want that, and that's what the little flap in the back of my book does right now.
Where did you buy the original?
I bought that off
set?
Bought it off of Amazon, but it's highly customized since then. So it's like I could put a link, but you're not going to have exactly what what I got.
Very cool, man.
Just search for leather
Commonplace books.
journal.
We need to bring it back into the modern day world where we're all just making commonplace books.
Well, and again, a commonplace book can be as simple as you can go to the store and buy one of those composition notebooks. It doesn't have to be fancy. What I'm doing is just this is what I've gotten to at this point. It does not have to be fancy for you to do that. Traveler's notebook is what this is called. If you search for it, you'll find it. There's really expensive ones. I found kind of a knockoff, and it worked out great for me. But like Midori is the company that is best known for these traveler's notebooks if you want to start going down that rabbit hole for yourself. So that's it. Hey, thanks for all the feedback. It was great having something to sort of bounce off of. It was great hearing from so many of you.
Yes, we loved it.
Feedback at gregandjennifer.com if you want to send us a voicemail or email. Or if you want to upload a video, you can always do that via WeTransfer.
And I'd like to ask for a couple of prayer requests for some longtime Rosary Army supporters.
Oh, yeah. I was going to ask you about that today.
For Dr. Elizabeth and also Jenny.
Yeah.
They both could really use some of your prayers for their well-being. And we certainly do appreciate that.
Yeah. Please keep them in your prayers. I was actually going to ask you if you'd heard from Jenny because she had surgery.
I have.
Oh, you have?
Yes, I have.
Is she doing okay?
Yes, she
Okay.
is.
She had surgery yesterday. We were concerned.
Yes.
I was about ready to send Jennifer up to Wisconsin to take care of you, Jenny. I was really concerned about just like
actually.
I kept
her
asking
sister
you.
showed up.
Okay.
And I'm like, oh, that's so sweet.
Because I kept asking you, I'm like, who's going to take care of her? Who's going to take care of Jenny? All right. So thank you for hanging out with us. We always love spending time with you. We hope that you enjoy spending time with us and you don't find it to be a complete and total waste of your time. Thank you for being here. Pray your rosary every single day.
And do whatever it takes to be holy.
RosaryArmy.com if you want a free rosary. RosaryArmy.com/donate if you want to help out our ministry. God
like
bless us.
Sheena. Thank you, Sheena.
Yeah, Sheena, you're awesome.